Back in May 1939, the British Mandate authorities had horrified the Jewish world by issuing a white paper. To the Zionists, it was the nullification of the Balfour Declaration, an attack on the Jewish people in their time of greatest need. The white paper restricted Jewish immigration to 15,000 a year for 5 years, and then whoever had the majority would have the state. This meant another Arab state in the Middle East. Politically, the British government was in a difficult situation. The Arabs were under the fanatical leadership of Haj Amin el-Husseini. He was a great admirer of Hitler and spent some of the war in Berlin. He would not countenance any further Jewish immigration. He warned the British that in any future conflict, unless they complied, the Arabs would rise up against them. Neville Chamberlain had stated, "If we must offend one side, let us offend the Jews." Churchill had countered, "This is another Munich. We are asked to submit to agitation which is ceaselessly inflamed by Nazi and fascist propaganda." In August 1939, at the last Zionist Congress before the war, Ben-Gurion, head of the Yishuv, stated, "We will fight the white paper as if there is no Hitler and fight Hitler as if there is no white paper." Throughout the war, despite evidence of genocide, the Mandate authorities adhered to the quota. Back in 1934, the Aliyah Bet, the Organization for Clandestine Immigration, had been created. Between 1934 and 1942, it was an effort to enable Jews to escape the horrors of Nazism. From 1945 to 1948, it was a crucial part of the Brichal movement. At the end of the war, Germany was divided between the four occupying powers. The Brichal movement funneled Jews into the American zone in Germany. The Americans imposed no restriction on movement out of the camps and were often sympathetic. There was also political motivation to pressure the Americans, to pressure the British, to open the gates of Palestine to the survivors. More than 50,000 survivors escaped from European ports en route to the land of Israel. Many of the boats were piloted by Allied Jewish war veterans, mainly Americans. The British established armed patrols to stop the survivors reaching land. Over half the boats were captured by the Royal Navy. 50,000 people were sent to camps on Cyprus, some to Atlit and some to Mauritius. 1,600 Jews were drowned. One of the reasons Zionism and the creation of the state became such an imperative was because of knowledge of what was happening in Europe. Back in 1939, Nachum Goldman, who later became head of the World Jewish Congress, said, "Even in 1939, I could not have imagined Auschwitz. You needed the soul of a poet, a Dante, to imagine the inferno. And yet there was knowledge." On the 16th of December 1939, a headline in the London Times read, "The Stony Road to Extermination." It reported on a German plan to deport more than 1 million Jews to Eastern Europe. Knowledge was coming through from many sources in neutral countries, from clergy, and particularly from the Polish underground and government in exile in London. On May 3, 1941, the Polish government sent a formal note to the Allied governments and neutral powers describing how tens of thousands of Jews were being incarcerated in camps. The final solution itself began with the invasion of Russia on Sunday the 22nd of June 1941. From then on, more reports were coming through. On the 27th of November 1941, Gerhard Riegner of the World Jewish Congress in Switzerland sent a report to Jerusalem. With regards to the Jews, it seems no place whatsoever has been allocated to them in Hitler's Europe. The remnants who escaped the massacres, starvations and oppression of the ghettos are no doubt to be sent overseas. On the 6th of January 1942, Molotov, the Russian foreign minister, sent a note to the Western Allies. In it, he gave a stark account, town by town, of what he described as abominable violence, outrage and massacre. He gave details of mass killings in the Ukraine, 6,000 in Lvov, 8,000 Odessa, 7,000 Kirsh, 10,500 Dnepropetrovsk, mainly old men, women and children, all of whom were stripped naked, robbed of their possessions before being shot into the pits. In May 1942, the Zionist organization met at the Biltmore Hotel in New York and demanded a Jewish state now, so the age-old wrong to the Jewish people be righted. On November the 29th, 1942, Ben-Gurion gave an address to the Yishuv National Council. We do not know exactly what goes on in the Nazi Valley of Death and how many Jews have already been slaughtered, murdered, burnt or buried alive, and how many others are being doomed to annihilation. Only from time to time does news of atrocities break through to us. The screams of women and children mutilated and crushed, but we do know what Hitler has in store for our people and what he wrote in Mein Kampf and what he has done to us before the war, during the war. We do not know that the victory of democracy and freedom and justice will not find Europe a vast Jewish cemetery in which the bones of our people are scattered and our bleeding nation calls the conscience of humanity to trial before the judgment of history. We are the only people in the world whose blood as a nation is allowed to be shed. Only our children, our women, our brothers are set apart for special treatment, to be buried alive, graves dug by them, to be cremated in crematoriums, to be strangled, and to be murdered by machine guns. For but one sin, because the Jews have no state, no army, no independence, no homeland. We demand the right to a homeland and independence. What happened to us in Poland, what God forbid will happen to us in the future, all our innocent victims, all our tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and perhaps millions are the sacrifices of a people without a homeland. Let us tell our dear brothers martyred and tortured in the Nazi ghettos, your tragedy is our tragedy. Your blood is our blood. We shall have no rest until we redeem you, both from the Nazi hell and from the debilitating exile, and bring you to the land we are building and redeeming, to our land. November the 23rd, 1942. The headline in the Palestine Post: Slaughter of European Jewry. Subheading: Annihilation of whole communities. The Jewish Agency of Palestine declared 4 days of mourning, culminating in a fast day on December the 2nd, 1942. All this and other information, including the leaking of events at the Wannsee Conference of January 1942, finally led to the Allied Declaration. On December the 17th, 1942, the governments in London, Moscow and New York made a statement. This is Anthony Eden, British Foreign Secretary. The German authorities, not content with denying to persons of Jewish race the most elementary human rights, are now carrying into effect Hitler's often repeated intention to exterminate the Jewish people in Europe. Throughout the war, the Zionist leadership of all shades sent cries of help to the Allied governments and church leaders to stop the slaughter of the Jewish people. The Zionists believed that even after knowledge of the death camps in the East, there was no real effort to save Jewish life. Yes, there were extraordinary people in many countries, but in terms of the enormity of the problem, it made very little difference. The case of Hungarian Jewry was particularly poignant. Until March 1944, Hungary was allied to Germany. The 800,000 Hungarian Jews were living under an autocratic, semi-fascistic regime, but in the main they were not deported. Admiral Horthy refused to deport his Jews. On the 19th of April 1944, Adolf Eichmann arrived in Budapest and began his plans. Following the German occupation, the Nazis, with cooperation from Hungarian fascists and police, succeeded in deporting and murdering over 596,000 men, women and children in Auschwitz. At the end of the war, the Zionists were determined that Palestine, be open to Jewish settlement and ultimately a Jewish state.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.